right, I'm just going to kind of walk through some of the tools in Photoshop that you're going to need for this upcoming assignment, which is the creativity postcard. So the next step of this next week, it is due in Photoshop. So you actually have to recreate that very last postcard that you did in Photoshop. And to do that, you're going to need to be using tools like your um, pencil tool, your brushes, maybe even the clone tool, your pen tool, of course, your eyedropper to change your colors and so on. So that's kind of some of the tools that I'm going to show throughout this video. So to start, I'm going to go into Photoshop up here. And what I want to do is just create a new document. You can also go up here to File New, or you can start learning your keyboard shortcuts. Very important to save time, which is Command N for File New. So I'm going to go to Create New. And in here, what I want this to be is 8.5 by 5.5, or you can also make this 5.5 by 8.5. You want this to be 300 dpi because 300 dpi is what is used for print. So that's the size that you want to make this, 300 dpi. I'm going to title this with my just exactly how I'm going to name it when the file is completed. So it's going to be my last name underscore and then postcard. And that's in your assignment directions. My background's white. You have other options in here, but that's not the point of this video to go over that. I just wanted to set this up specifically as to what your document is going to look like when you start recreating that postcard in Photoshop. So I'm going to go ahead and say create. We have one artboard in here. One of the things with Photoshop is you do have options as well for numerous artboards. So if you were doing some kind of let's say a package for your identity, so some kind of an identity package, then you may have 3 or 4 or 5 or something artboards in here that you're working off of at the same time. All right, so one of the things, so over here, just looking at all of your tools, I do have this turned on. You can shut this off, but this is just a prompt to show you exactly what each one of these tools do. So if you select, it'll give you kind of a little video. And I wanted to leave that on just so you could kind of roll over it and see exactly what it's showing you that it's going to do with, your selection tools and your lasso tool and the brush and so on. And it kind of gives you a little idea of how to use some of these specific tools. Of course, you're going to need a little bit more, I think, information in order to be able to actually use the tool, but it helps to show you kind of what that tool is. I'm going to start with our brush tool, which is one of the main tools that you are going to be using when you recreate this postcard. So over here, and I'm going to just kind of grab this. There are 2 palettes that you're going to probably need out for the most part on a continual basis. And that's your brushes palette and then your layers palette. And then, of course, if you were to switch to, say, your pencil tool, this palette here is going to change. If you noticed that, I'll change that back to the brushes. But if you notice, it does change and give you some different options as opposed to the options that you got with the brush tool. So kind of keep an eye on that. Every time you switch, if I go to the mixer brush tool, I again get, different tools. It shows you kind of this color icons here that you can use for the mixer brush. We'll get into that maybe even in another video. Then you have your paint bucket tools, so that kind of, if you have, say, I'd used your marquee and you went in here and had the marquee here and then you wanted to fill it with some kind of paint, I could go in here and choose a color and then go up here and fill this with that color. So that's kind of how that works. You can do selections, all sorts of different selections with all these selection tools, and then just go ahead and fill it with color. Now, one of the other tools in here to use is that you need to really learn is that undo tool. So if I wanted to undo this, it's Command Z. I mean the shortcut for that. So if I wanted to undo this, it's Command Z. And that's going to take the color out of it. And then deselecting is Command D. So to get rid of this marquee around here is Command D. And then I can also, of course, go up to any of the edit or anything, and all those options would be in here. Undo, deselect. And then toggling to the last state is one that I use quite often. So that's another option, as you can go back in history several spaces, several movements, I should say. All right, I'm going to go back in here now and get that brush. And we're going to kind of explore this and how the brush works. So when you have your brushes, you have this palette over here, which shows you all sorts of different brushes. Here's a round, blunt, medium, stiff brush. If I click on that and then I start painting, it's going to give, that kind of roughness at the beginning and that kind of roughness at the end. Now, how do you get it spaced so that it kind of looks a little bit more flourished at the beginning and the end is where the size comes in. So I can go in and change the size of this, and now you see it's more separated in there, and it's starting to look a little bit more like this. But you still, even with the smaller brush, you have this on the end. But the size is key to kind of working through what you want your brush to look like. All right, let's back up just a teeny bit with the brush. I'm going to undo this. And undo. Well, I guess I'll have to go up here. My keyboard shortcut isn't working here. Gonna have to look into that, but undo brush tool. Then I want to undo brush tool again. So I guess I just had to do Command Z. In the older version, you couldn't do Command Z multiple times. You had to go in and do Command Option Z. So anyway, in the 2020 version, this has changed. So it's just Command Z. All right, so now I'm back to a blank stage here. All right, I want to go into these two places here where you can control the smoothness and you can control the flow, and you can control your opacity. So if I go up here to my brushes, I get kind of the similar options as to what I had initially in this palette here. So, I mean, you're going to, in the brushes palette, once I click on this, it's kind of the same thing. So you can either use this brushes palette to kind of scroll through all of your brushes here, or you can go in and you can see that there are many brushes. You can also download a whole bunch of brushes to put into the palette. You can also switch. If I click on this button here, it now gives me, a whole bunch more options with my brushes. So this becomes really fun if you really want to get into this, where you can actually change your bristles. Now, depending on which brush you have selected, in this case, we have that round, blunt, medium, stiff brush. And so because of that, these are the options that I'm getting for that. I can change my bristles, and it'll show you what that's going to look like as you change your bristles, okay? I can change the length of, the smoothness and so on of that brush. I can change the thickness of it. So you see, the thicker that I go, the more of that detailed little swirls that I'm losing. If I change the brush, say to this one, now I don't have all those options that I had there. But I have all sorts of options in here as well. I mean, you guys have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of options to get the right brush with the right texture and the right smoothness and the right look that's going to help you to recreate that postcard. There's no right or wrong answer here. I oftentimes, when I was teaching in the classroom, that students would say, you know, this is what I'm trying to get, and how do I get there? And I just can't answer that specifically for you usually. So it's more a matter of you going in and experimenting with all these tools, with all these brushes to try and all these options to get you to that point. And you can spend a lot of time doing that, you know, and being really, really, really picky about it, or just kind of going with, well, okay, this kind of looks good. I think I'll stick with this. Now, the other options too with your brushes. So let me go back into here with my soft round. And I'm going to go up to the top here and kind of explain the size and the hardness. So the size is, of course, you know, how big the brush is. You can see the black circle inside of my circle with the crosshair there. And you can see that this is the size that that brush is. And if I clicked on this and painted, that's the size it is. Now, because of the smoothing up here, I have my hardness set at 0. And so as a result, I'm creating, if you see down here, this is all feathered. So that actually was the size of this brush, but because it's feathered and it has this smoothing aspect to it, it looks all blurred around the edges. So the more the smoothing and the less the hardness, the more of this blurred edge and feathering that you're going to get on the brush. If I crank this up to being 100% hardness, you'll see down here already, it's showing you that's what that's going to look like. And then when I click here, you'll see that there is my brush. Nice and hard. It's the same size as these up here. It's just because it doesn't have the smoothing on it and it's not feathered, because I have it at 100% of the hardness. So again, where you change that is either here, or you can change it, you know, up here, or you can change it down over here in some of these settings to get the hardness where you want it to be. So again, it's just an option you have, whatever you want to do with it. All right, I'm going to go in and kind of just, you know, your other options here is just to have, this is to open and close these brush settings. That's what this is. Your modes we'll talk about a little later here, but that has to do with kind of the layer that you're on, as well as how you want that brush to react to the layer underneath it or the brush underneath it. So we'll get into that a little later. Then you have your opacity. So if I wanted to turn this opacity down to say 50%, I could now click here and you see, compared to these two, this is at 100% and this is at 50%. All right, I'm going to put that back up to 100. Then you have here a couple different options. So this here is this is if you kind of had, if you had hooked up a tablet, a Wacom tablet to draw on. Those of you that are kind of artists and maybe even have a Wacom tablet already. But if you don't, you might want to kind of look into it and maybe ask Augusto to explain it to you. But if I had that on and I had a Wacom tablet, then that's what would be controlling the pressure and the flow. So the flow again is, the flow is just kind of goes hand in hand with the pressure of that pencil that you're using to draw in on your tablet. or if you have this on, it's not really going to work with your mouse because, again, it's all about that pen hovering over your tablet and how much pressure you put on that. All right, smoothing is going in, is how, if I were to click on this, you'll see that this is kind of, again, smooth. The edges on here, you can kind of see, I'll zoom in a little bit, but because I have one at 10 and one at, or one at 10% and one at 0, you aren't going to see too much, but you can kind of see a little bit of a difference here. Not a lot, but so smoothing is the edges and how those edges form. All right, then the angles and so on. So this is the angle of the brush. You have an option here for settings, smoothing options, and so on. And if you had other things chosen, that would highlight. And then you have here again the pressure. So a lot of these elements here are specifically for tablets. Now this symmetry, I have to say, is I haven't used this before. This is new in 2020. So it looks kind of interesting. Maybe after we draw here a little bit, I'll maybe turn that on and see what we get if I have it on. So I'm not sure how it's going to work. All right. So I'm going to go in just with my brush, and I'm going to just choose, say, I don't know, some of these are, I always like just experimenting with something maybe I haven't used in the past. How about this one? Looks interesting. So I'm going to go in and choose a color. So your colors in here are right here in this palette. Now the other place your colors are too is once you click on this, then you're going to get the option to go in and change your colors here. So I can use this to kind of scroll around and see how it's changing my new color from the current. And so I can do that. Now, if this is a color that I want to continue to use throughout this drawings, then what I want to do is add that to my swatches, so that then when I open up my swatches, which are right here right now, if I added this to the swatches, you can name it. I'm going to say red orange. And then that'll go into your swatches. All right, so now you've got, that up here. Sometimes when they open these up too, you have to kind of look and go, uh-oh, where did that disappear to? But anyway, there we go. So now I've got that. I have this brush chosen. I haven't gone in and changed any of this in here yet. But I'm going to go in and just kind of draw and show you kind of what this currently looks like if I draw with it. It's an interesting brush. If I go down, let's say up in smoothness and down in size, how's that going to look? So if I go more hard, then how's that going to look? I'm not real thrilled with this brush, but I just wanted to show you for experiment's sake, what I get. It looks like it does kind of fade a bit, so it's probably a matter of playing with it to try and get this kind of look over here. So that's a square charcoal. I'm going to undo this. Now remember with this assignment, so I'm just doing Command Z, Command Z, Command Z, Command Z to undo all of that. Let's do one more kind of interesting one here, something that, we could play with a little bit here to see kind of what we get. Maybe turn on the smoothing a little bit so that it flows a little better. You also have the option of spacing here, so you can go down to 0 if you want, or you can increase the spacing. You'll see that when I increase the spacing now, it's going to be like this. And I do have this at 100%, so I can't get that up much more for you guys to see. So hopefully you can see what the spacing is doing here. I'll kind of zoom in on that. And let me draw it again here. You can kind of see what the brush looks like. And that's with the spacing turned up to 153%. So again, it's all a matter of going in and kind of playing with it, playing with all your options that you have here and all the options that you have for your size and so on and so forth. Notice that I've got this on one layer right now. And what I'm going to do is name this layer. Always, always, always name your layers. I'm going to just call it the color that this is, which is kind of an orange brown. And you can name your layers, of course, anything that you want. To get to naming, what I did was rolled my mouse over it, clicked on it. And sometimes you have to double click, which I did there. And then you'll get that highlighted. And now you're able to name your layer. All right, let's go in and I'm going to zoom back a little bit. And let's go in and choose a different brush just so that you can see how layers kind of work here. And what I want to do with this is create a new layer. So you always need to go in as you guys switch around with colors or even your shapes. You need to go in and make sure that you do layer, 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 layers. So every new color, make it a different layer. If you're doing new shapes or something, you might want to do a new layer, even if it's a different color. But just make sure that you're separating these out because it's going to be much easier down the line to then be able to turn a layer on or off or erase from one specific layer as opposed to having all these layers overlapping and now you can't get at what you want to get at without erasing something else. So that's why you want to use layers. I'm going to call this layer blue, green, and then I'm going to go ahead and I did blue, green, and then I hit enter to commit that. So, or return, depending on whether you're on a PC or Mac. And then I'm going to go over here and choose a blue-green color. So I'm going to click on that and just kind of scroll down here into greeny-ish territory and maybe a little more blue and a little darker. And then this is the one I want to use. Now again, I can add that to my swatches and call it blue-green just so it's in there. And say okay. And now I'm going to go ahead in here and paint, but I'm going to get a different brush. Whoops, sorry, I scrolled too far. My mouse is am I making anybody dizzy? All right, I'm making myself dizzy. Okay, so I'm going to go in here and get just a plain old brush here. I'm going to scroll up to the top and get this soft round. And then I'm going to go ahead in and increase my size if I want, which I do. Now, another way to increase your size as opposed to continuing to go up here and changing the size, because that becomes really awkward. If you're trying to even erase something or you're trying to pinpoint something, what you want to do is start using these keyboard shortcuts to increase the brush size. So the keyboard shortcut to increase the brush size is the right curly brace. So if I hit my right curly brace on the keyboard there, it's the one, next to the P's there are your left curly brace and right curly brace. And if I hit that multiple times, oh, don't tell me now they have, well, let me see. Let me go in here. There. I had to get out of that window. But if I hit my right curly brace multiple times, it's increasing the size now of that brush. Okay? And then I can just go ahead and paint. And I'm not going back up here to take this down now. I'm just using my left curly brace to now decrease the size and put another stroke over there. And again, I can continue that process with just going in and increase and decrease, just keeping my fingers. I always have my fingers over that right and left curly brace when I'm painting, so I can just keep going up and down in brush size. If I want to go ahead and choose a different brush, I can do that and put a different brush in here. If I want to make another color, before I kind of walk out of this, if I want to make another color, I hit my plus sign here on the layers palette right there. I'm going to name this blue. And then I'll go ahead and hitting my return key or enter key. Then I'm going to go in and get a different color here. I'll get my blue. And then I'm going to go in and get a different brush, or I'll keep this brush and just resize it. All right. And there we go. Now, again, what you guys are going to be doing for this assignment is you're going to be copying your thumbnail, so your postcard thumbnail there. And that's the one you're going to kind of have sitting there in front of you, Photoshop open, and then you need to kind of just start drawing and kind of recreating that last thumbnail that you did. All right, let's say I want to use my pencil tool. I'll just kind of show you this quick. But if I go into my pencil tool, again, you're going to get options here. The same options are with your smooth and so on, whatever that is. So, I mean, you kind of get the same options. And then here you can do all sorts of different things too with the pencil tool. These are, you know, little prints. I guess, again, I'm sorry, I'm back into the 2020, so it's a little different, so I'll have to kind of research that, back up a little bit here and research it. But you could do, in the past, we can do leaf prints and stuff, and I'm just kind of not sure why it's not giving me the option, but let's go ahead and move on. Let me go back in with my pencil here. And so in the pencil tool anyway, we've got your softness and hardness, and then you can change the different sizes of that pencil. So that's the option. And then again, I don't want to do the blending modes yet. All right, but here's the pencil. And you don't get, you know, a lot of it's just like a real pencil. If you want to have any of this fancy stuff here with, you know, other brushes, then you need to get your brush tool. All right, eraser. So let's say we kind of made a mess here and we want to go in and erase a few things. This is where it comes in handy too, to have all this stuff on the layers. So let's say a part right now, what we have, I'll kind of hide these other layers. So using your eyes here turns the layers on and off. This is all my blue. If I shut this eye off, click on it, turn on the green one, that's all my green. Then if I shut that off, here's all my brown, orange brown. So let's say in here what I wanted to do was twofold. What I want to do in here is I want to go in and erase a few of these pieces. So maybe I don't want this and I don't want this on here. So I'm going to, you know, select these, just solely this layer. So I'm not affecting the other layers at all. You can also go into these and after you turn them on and off, you can go in too and lock these layers if you want. But let's just click on our brown. The lock thing is here. So if I click on here, I can go in and, well, I'm not showing it. So I could show it and then go in and lock it. All right. But I'm going to unlock that and just hide it. All right. I'm going to go into my orange brown. I have my eraser tool. Again, it's the same up here. I can even feather my eraser tool just like I did with my brushes. So see how soft that is up there. But what I want to do is I'm going to do really hard. And I'm going to go in and erase a few of these lines. And after I close this window, I'm going to go over here, change kind of the size of this, and then I'll go ahead in here and erase this. So I'm just going to erase a couple of these lines. I'll get this erased too. And then I'll go in and erase the rest of this here. All right, let's say I decided that I didn't really like this color here, this brownish color, and I decided I wanted to make it a different color. Maybe I want it to be like a bright red or a yellow or something. Well, that's where over here in your layers palette, that's where this transparency comes in. So I can click on this lock transparent pixels. So in other words, all these pixels, you can see here too, this gray and white checkerboard, it's showing you where all these pixels are. When I initially set this window up, I set it up so that it would be a white background. But this is actually, you know, transparent. It wouldn't print out white or anything. This is actually transparent. And these pieces, if I get my move tool for that layer, and I kind of click here and pull this down, you see, this is all transparent. You can kind of see that as I move it around. All right, so let's say I want to change, I decide I don't like this color, I want to change the color. Well, because it's on a transparent background, I can just click here on this lock transparent pixels. Now those pixels are locked. I still have that layer selected. I'm going to go in and choose a different color. Make it, well, something more drastic. So it's, let's say pink or purple. That's pretty, purple. Let's say, okay. Get my brush, which is underneath that pencil tool. Now to get to that, I'm holding down my mouse here. So I'm clicking on this and holding it down. And now I can get back to my brush tool. All right, I'm going to choose a nice hard brush. And then I'm going to go ahead and paint around all of these. So see, as I'm painting, it's changing the color of all of this. I could get a really big brush and do it a lot faster. And then I'm painting the bottom there too. So that's this lock transparency tool here. If you decide you've got this on a transparent background, you decide you want to change the colors, and you could even do this for, I could even make this, let's say, a green. And then with that lock transparent on, I can just run my brush just specifically over this and repaint the whole thing. So anywhere I paint now is going to change that to green. If I would just want this painted, I can just do that. See, I can go in and change all of those colors. All right, for this particular video now, I'm going to kind of stop here. You have in here again, you have your pencil tool underneath here. We went over all of these features in your brushes, and once again, layers. And then once again, I'll turn these back on here. But once, ooh, isn't that lovely? Once again, there is no, you know, I can't, I can maybe, you know, play with it. If some of you are struggling to kind of find the right brush to get what you are trying to get to, you can certainly email me, send me your file, and let me look at it to see if perhaps I can find some kind of brush that might work a little better. But I'm not sure I'm going to be much help there. It's going to be a matter of me experimenting with it or you experimenting with it. So don't, of course, hesitate to ask, but do explore kind of all of these options. You've got thousands of them between the brushes palette and the brush settings here. So you've got thousands of these options in here to kind of play with, to explore and have it look like your thumbnail of your postcard. All right, so I'm going to end this. Hope this helps everybody with their assignment.